Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I'm Ross Aiken. I'm Old Who.
My name is Melvin Pena. I represent You Who.
And I am choking. There you go.
Don't die on the podcast, please, Joe.
It's a possibility. It's a possibility. Go out doing something you love is what they're saying, isn't it?
All right, so folks, we're here to talk about the latest episode, Dot and the Bubble, which we all have deep feelings, which we've already talked about in the missing episode we recorded earlier this morning. So,
we'll call that episode 169 Prime.
Yeah. So we're going to start with Jeff. What was your take on Dot and the Bubble?
I mean, in our lost recording, I said the episode kind of speaks for itself and says all that it really needs people to hear, and I stand by that. It has left me kind of haunted a little bit this weekend in a state of shell shock and realization that Doctor Who is a very different beast now to what it has been before, but is still intrinsically and blatantly Doctor Who.
This episode couldn't be more Doctor Who on some levels.
Oh yeah, because as we've already discussed once, is this is Doctor Who. On the surface, it feels very much like an RTD 2005 episode. Mm-hmm. It has that bubblegum kind of entertainment feel to it. But underneath the surface of that is something very different. And it catches you unawares every single time, or at least it has done with me. It did with 73 Yards. It did with... what was the episode before that? Boom, which I had to work through my own issues with that episode. But again, here we are doing something very dark, very important. We are touching on the now. In science fiction terms, we are looking at modern issues in that science fiction setting, which is what science fiction is for, and why we have science fiction.
Yeah, I agree. I went going into this thinking from the hype and the trailer that this was going to be a light and funny. Let's look at the bright colors. It's they've just given us back to back heavy. They're gonna do a palate cleanse, of course, correct. They're gonna change it up because that's what you do. You put stories in certain orders because you want to take your viewers on a roller coaster ride, and it wasn't. We got to the end, and it was rough. It was rough. It was a tough ending but it was necessary because the idea, I went, okay, it's going to be yet another commentary on social media, and I have a lot of issues with cultural media, but it goes beyond just the cultural media being in your own bubble. It is walking around in the modern world. A lot of people are walking around in their own bubble. They don't want to go out. They don't want to deal with the other, because that's what this story is about, the other. Someone who is different than you, and in this very dismissive way. The character, what is her name other than, because I just want to call her nasty name.
Lindy, Nasty Pepperbean. Lindy Pepperbean is her
Lindy
name.
Pepperbean is everything I hate about social media, everything I hate about influencers. I hate that term. I hate it. She is Paris Hilton. She is all these things, this vapid, shallow human being. But in a normal Doctor Who, they become your hero. They change. In this, she doesn't want to, she doesn't care.
She doubles down.
She does.
On who she is.
It's a it's a JD or a John Barrowman,
Yeah.
Where I'm not that person. Well, you keep doing the same thing. You are that person. You know?
It's locking in that safety infrastructure, and it is possibly could be charitably viewed as a self-defense mechanism. I can't stray outside what I know. I can't stray outside.
Yeah, but she doesn't
the
want
culture.
to. That's what gets it. Is the lack of self-awareness, because she sacrifices somebody
Yeah, for her own benefit.
for her own
And that is
benefit,
what
and doesn't
we see
care.
that happen in social media, though. People are sacrificed by the power of blocking, and that, of course, is a theme that immediately gives us the indicator that something is not right in this world. Something is intrinsically wrong with it. It's and that is all revealed in their racism and their dislike of the other. It's such a heavy episode that is so light and frothy around the outside, and there is so much to delve into.
Oh God, the color palette is very. The kids dress like they're from one of those Disney sitcoms, like the whatever Waverly Place and stuff like that. They all are very trendy. They're all very bubbly. They're all very energetic. Even the doctor, Dr. P, which I found hysterical. But also unable to make a decision on their own. They can't even walk. That made me laugh. Oh, you can't walk without instruction. I can't walk without arrows. You know, it's like, wow. But it is that.
And what that is I can't go through life without someone else thinking for me.
Yeah, the group mind.
Yeah,
thinking for me. So as a white man, and we Jeff kind of touches on this in the previous recording, is it's meant to. I felt as that is not someone was raised not to be prejudiced, and my father was very like one of those people with no prejudice hardwired in his head. It wasn't in there. And it was an unacceptable behavior because of what he said. If you're prejudiced against somebody, you're either weak or a coward. Because it just, you don't think like that. That is a sign of, it isn't. But I think it's meant for people. I don't know who's supposed to get kicked in the guts for this, but I think it kicks everybody in the guts. I think
everyone.
I think it's meant to trigger everybody. If he can turn one person who doesn't realize their prejudice, I don't know if he's trying to fix it or just show us. I don't know. But it's like a punch in the gut, and I appreciate that. I think these punches of guts need to be done in art, because art is more than just entertainment. It should give you a visceral, physical reaction tied to an emotion or something. And I didn't feel guilty or anything like that, but I was just like, oh, God, this is so right on the nose in our world today, that these Karens, these people exist. They've always existed, but they've been given free rein. They've been given a voice, and we needed to see it again.
And racism has been given societal norm.
That's
it. They are raised in a racist society to be racist, to dislike
you have to
and
learn
fear the other.
You have to learn to be a bigot. It's not ingrained in you. You pick it up. So if you're raised by people like this, and they're the children of the elite, it seems, who always looked at, they just have a longer list of how you're other. You don't have money. You have a different skin color. You're the wrong gender. You don't speak the way I speak. You know what I mean? Because there's so many ways to be disregarded. Invisible. So I just felt it was an incredible. I think it's probably the most powerful episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen, and it had. And I want to say this now, is like a lot of the set, the design, and that is very Disney, and I think it's closer to a Disney show in the way that the characters are dressed everything, the set and stuff like that, than it is maybe BBC normal Doctor Who. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's. I think he's thinking that when he writes this. How can I make this look like a Disney show for a little bit more? So when I slam that door at the end, you all are just on your knees. So, all right, Melvin, what's your take?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and it's been very difficult to avoid the internet this weekend because for me, I had a very similar sort of reaction where at the end of the episode, after watching it, and this has happened the last several episodes since that first two-parter, where even that was so sort of out there and so not what we were used to in terms of traditional Doctor Who, that these last few episodes in particular have been really complex, rich texts full of challenging ideas where you get to the end and you're just sort of like flummoxed because there are so many things happening. There are so many themes being bandied about. There are so many issues that are being tackled at once that each could carry, obviously, their own episode. And I just got back from walking my dog and thinking about it again, even after our first sort of hour talking about it. And it really, for me, if it has to be about one thing, I think Dot and Bubble is about ontological inflexibility. It's like, I only know one way to be, and I cannot see another way of thinking. I cannot envision, I cannot even imagine another way of thinking. And I feel like that is a very Disney audience with, much less a tea time British family audience. I just feel like there's so much here to talk about and think about and work through. And I'm really grateful for this season of Doctor Who to give us so much complexity. I think that's for beginning thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember who. I mean, I've always thought Doctor Who meant that there was, they were, come on, Barry Letts is in whatever afterlife he is out and going, okay, cool. This is what I wish I could have. You know what I mean? Because he always had he had a message, and it's like it was this or that. It was ecological was a big thing with him, and stuff like that. And any story should teach you something, make you feel something, and then but this is we talked about it before that people were afraid Davies is going to come back and repeat what he did before. And it's like, well, the man's never repeated. He's always grown. His stuff gets stronger and stronger year after year. It's a sin. All the way
years
back.
And years.
Years and years. And all the way back to Queer as Folk and Cucumber and stuff like that. But I think this is him going, this is that Queer as Folk, it's a sin level of cultural awareness, but on Doctor Who.
And it's really extraordinary that he can marshal his writing talents to talk about so many things that are so important to him. I mean, he said initially that he was unsure about coming back, but that he ultimately decided to because he had things to say. And I've seen a lot of hand-wringing on the internet about, is Russell T. Davies the right person to write an episode, quote, about racism for a black actor? And my thing is, we've already heard, I think, a little bit from behind-the-scenes stuff that the next series that they're already filming. I mean, I think they just wrapped. They
wrapped like Tuesday or Wednesday, I think.
That has a broader writer's room. And I'm wondering and I'm hoping and I'm thinking, and we were talking last week in 70, was it 73? No, it was in Boom 2 weeks ago about, what does that do for us? What does that say for us? And one of my sort of tenets of faith in the Russell 2 era is that he's incorporated those ideas. He's incorporated those voices, that these are things that are important to him, and that what he is doing by marshaling and writing most of the episodes of this first season is preparing the way. He's opening the door so that other voices can take center stage.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that. And, again, if Ncuti Gatwa, say, or one of the other actors, Varada Setu, who was in Boom, who's going to be the companion for the season that just or one of the companions. Like if they had problems with the way their characters were being portrayed, if they had issues with the way that the writing made characters of their ethnic background or racial background, which are very important distinctions to make, and is another thing I was thinking about on my dog walk. They would have said something. They would have had, they would have had something to say. They would have, again, like for Ncudi's first scene to be that closing scene where he is begging. He's begging them to let him save their lives, and they will not listen. Like, I mean, again, like it's that's powerful acting, and again, it's a powerful scene, and to have it be his first day, I've seen people raising issues with that. Like, why have a black actor on his first day deal with like racism? Like that's. I feel like it's a great place to start because it shows that Russell, if that's day one of filming and that's Ncuti Gatwa's first scene of filming, you are serious about this. This is not a game. This is not something he's doing to put white words into a black mouth. Like he is committed to this.
Yeah, I think that's a conscious decision on the director. I don't have Ncuti for a bunch. We're going to do most of our filming with him and Millie standing in front of a camera, reading lines to the second AD. Yeah. Because the actress, Callie Cook, who is, she needs her own little section because she deserves it. I think that's a conscious decision, and that is Ncuti, the producers, Russell, saying, I want to start with this. I want, I want you to have this. And the acting on all levels, we're all praising Ncuti, and we should, because it's a powerful scene. Millie, because she only says one or two things, and she walks away and she gently touches his arm, and she just has to go. She just needs to get away. It's just stop, don't. They're not going to listen to you. It's awful, and she just is disgusted, and it feels for her friend, and he's in tears, and they look at him. All of the Finetime citizens who have made it to this escape route and are getting on this thing that looks like the Disney ride from.
It sort of does.
It's meant to.
Reminded me of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
It did, but also if you ever go to Disneyland and get on the Jungle Boat ride, it's the same. Yeah. It's that you feel like you're on that ride. But you get a little bit of a different look from. The female, Lindy, because she's thinking, have I done the right thing or not? It's not like, oh, I've made a mistake. It's just, you see that, have I done what I needed to do? I don't know what you're supposed to think, but there's a different look on her face. It's not regret. It's not shame.
Yeah, no.
But it's not indifference. Where with everybody else,
and this is something that we talked about the first time around, and I love that we're having a second sort of go at this, because I think definitely my ideas, even just from that first conversation, have grown and shifted a little bit, because we talked a little bit in that first recording about her cognitive dissonance, that she is really the character that we see like having to wrestle with the atrocities that are happening right in front of her, and getting on with my life. Like, she sees Bertie Lester when she's still in her office, as it were, at work, like being eaten by the slug creature. And she's like, I just want to work. I need to get back to work. Like, there's that frisson. This is how I see the world, with what is actually happening in front of my face. And we get that. He sacrifices Ricky September and starts, closes the door on him and crawls down through the portico to the lower level. And you see her face go from sort of that, and it's exactly the same sort of look that she has on the boat at the very end. It's the exact same process of emotional work that's happening in her head. Is like, I have to reconcile something really awful that just happened. I am unsure how to deal with my standard way of seeing the world. I have to integrate these two things, because I cannot go forward having to do work. And by work, I mean that emotional labor of the emotional work of having to change your mind.
Yeah, she's filing it away, but she's never going to use it. And something I didn't talk is how when what's the singer's name?
Ricky September.
Ricky September gets shot. You get a blood splatter on the screen. I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's.
But that was very brutal.
The screen's clouded. You hear a really disgusting noise, and you see her pull the door shut from over his shoulder. It's really because the other deaths are comical. Yeah. When they're being eaten by the slugs, it's comical. It's meant to be comical. When she's walking through the thing and you see, someone being sucked in, screaming. It's meant to be a little
the Ricky
funny.
September one is much more of a headshot. It's much more brutal. It's much more.
Yeah.
But you're in a different level. And I don't even know that we talked about that before, because you have that sort of pastel, Finetime, everything is clean, and then you move to that lower level where that liminal space, that space between the city and the river. And again, we talked about that last time also with 73 Yards. That sort of you're crossing.
Hey.
Where other things become possible. Again, you're in this weird sort of post-industrial where dramatic violence can happen. And he's been batting around the little dot with his metal pole for a while. But that's the weird part also, is that when he realizes she is leaving him to dry, he drops the pole. Like, he no longer even tries to defend himself. And I find that very perplexing as well.
Well, I mean, it's so sad. I think he's crushed. He saved her. He's different than the rest of them. It seems. We don't know, because we never get to see him with the doctor.
What's also interesting is that's the first time she makes a conscious choice for herself, other than switching on and off the dot and bubble. Yeah. That is her first true decision that she makes in this story, in this world maybe, where she goes, I'm going to let this guy die for me because I'm more important.
Yeah, and remember I'm in love him. I'm a big fan, and she's starstruck. Yeah. And then he's like, no, you guys, you're not seeing the right world. I'm showing you, and she not only lets it kill him, she tells the dot that what his real last name, so he moves up in the queue to die because they're doing it alphabetically.
It's people are expendable in modern society. People are endlessly expendable, and if it benefits oneself, then it's a case of what is your choice? Are you going to make the hard decision, or are you going to make the easy decision? And that's one of
the most sort of grisly parts of this episode, and thinking about that ontological inflexibility, as I called it, or that refusal to change your mind, or that that idea that you are so committed to your ideology. And again, whether that's racism or classism or, whatever it happens to be that you believe that sort of fervently in, that, they will follow it to their own deaths. Like it's not only like, one of the analogs that we can look at, especially in American culture, is this idea of sort of right-wing voters of the lower class being preyed upon by politicians, saying, we are with you, we are the people who represent your interests, while they're continually voting against their interests. Like, they are anti-union. The politicians, like, you're working class and you're literally busting unions. Like, but the fact is that they cannot. Those two things don't mesh in their heads. They're like, because you're saying things that I want to hear, none of the rest of it matters to me. And we are happy to blame ethnic minorities. We're happy to blame refugees. We're happy to blame people in the Middle East. We're happy to blame literally anyone except for the people who are literally,
and these
through
are
their own actions, making your life worse.
Yeah, and this
are the people that you are behind. You are supporting them. And they are literally making your lives worse. Your infrastructure is crumbling. You have no health insurance. We're letting you die during a pandemic. We're telling you not to wear masks. Like, it goes on and on and on. All these things that are...
We lost you again. We lost you again.
That they are so committed to ideologically, they cannot see that they are actively harming them.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I'm on social media, and I just do it for the podcasts and to keep in touch with a few friends I've met on the internet. I've met good people on it, but for the most part, a lot of it, the bad parts, even on X and this, is that we all live in our own little bubble and we're believing stuff. And I see the right wing nut jobs, on like Twitter or Facebook, who are saying this shit, and it's like, one, are you a real person, or are you a bot there to convince people, which, you know what I mean, or what Melvin's bringing up, it's like, and I talk to a buddy at work about this all the time, it's like, you have these people that have been voting for the far right, and the reason they voted for Trump is they've said they were not feeling that they were being seen by either party. And they had every right to feel that way, because we don't do anything for the poor in this country except blame them for their own thing. Oh, you're poor because you're not willing to work. No, there are no good jobs by me because you don't want to pay people shit. But they buy it. And that you have,
because again, you can blame the job losses on foreigners who are coming from Mexico. So we got to build a wall to keep Mexicans out. And again, so we haven't even really talked about the racism thing in this recording. But again, I am a Mexican American. I am an ethnic minority. I do face these kinds of racist. Like it's just a mindset, and it's all the time. It's everywhere you go. And it's hard to explain, and it's hard to convince people of that these things still happen. I mean, in the last recording, I talked about going to a karaoke bar in Pittsburgh where I walked in and literally everyone looked at me. One of the bartenders would not acknowledge my presence, would not serve me. Didn't say anything, but just didn't look at me. And a sort of other complimentary experience that I didn't talk about last time was that when I was in Iowa this past week, my brother, this is such a complicated thing because I look and I present as an ethnic minority. My mother looks and presents white. My brother got the genetic thing where he passes as white, and like it was hard to explain to him because we went to a restaurant at some point and he got on my case. He was like, "Why does your voice change? Why do you act differently when strangers are around?" And that is the hard thing, even in my own family, to sort of explain to people, is because I'm used to people looking at me like I'm a threat, even though I've just sat down to have a burger. Like, you do change the way you act. You do change the way you treat people because you want to diffuse the idea of the inherent idea that you are threatening before it even takes root. Like these things are so complicated.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit, but it's it's an important thing to talk about because a lot of people on the internet are saying that this episode is quote about racism, which it's one part of that ideological inflexibility. It's one part of it, but it is it's definitely symptomatic of a larger problem.
Oh yeah,
which is all of these things we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is more. I think in having it be Shudy's first scene and have that reaction, because we've never seen a group of people just do this. And Doctor, would any other writer have thought to write that scene for the Doctor?
In any other era of Doctor Who, the Doctor would have sent them on his way with his blessing to go and populate a new world, and it would have been a case of, look at these brave souls, not these people are deliberately choosing to go and die, effectively, because they're not going to understand how to not die,
or even acknowledge the idea of, or even countenance the idea of accepting help from an outsider. Again, whether it's because he's black, or I mean, they
because he's not
Pepperbean,
from their world, because he's too old, too colourful,
It's that
and Wendy Pepperbean at some point talks about like, you're not one of us. But throughout the episode, I feel like RTD's writing sort of couches her racism in sort of in terms that make it a little bit vague as to whether she's being racist, whereas at the end you get the hoochie pie and some of the other people who are like talking about voodoo or, you're not like us, specifically on the nose, which is, I feel like, how it would have been in previous eras. Like you see Krasko, the space racist in the Rosa Parks episode, who literally says, we cannot allow your kind to flourish. And like, he's going back to stop the civil rights. Like that is as on the nose as it gets.
Yeah.
Or the World War I episode in the two-parter, the Human Nature Family of Blood in the first RTD era, where the kids at the school are literally saying the most racist things to Martha. That is how, like, these are the way, like, we would have treated it much more on the nose. It is very advanced script writing for RTD to make an episode that is nominally about racism, where the racism is the twist at the end somehow. Like, that is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I think from the reactions I've seen on social media, for a lot of people, that twist really did land, and it hit them, and it sucked the air out of the room. We talked earlier, I've grown up in a multicultural city, I'm used to seeing Black, Asian, East Asian faces and hearing the Polish and the Latvian, and there's a lot of different cultures within my city, and so the first thing I noticed really was how white it was presenting within the bubble. So I had an in to where this was going, or to what so it didn't really hit me as quite as hard, but it was certainly no less impactful for that, because when your suspicions are then confirmed, that's just as bad as having the rug pulled out from under you, when you can see this insidiousness and still not be able to call it out because it is insidious. It is hidden within the construct of society, their society, and it is all pervasive to the point that to them, it's just them. It is part of their way that they address it, and we talked about it not being cynical earlier, and it's not. Yep. But there is a thin layer of cynicism that runs through. I wouldn't call it a cynical piece. I would say there is cynicism there in as equal a measure as all of the other ingredients that make this what it is. And that, I said earlier, this season of Doctor Who is probably the first time we can truly say Doctor Who is award-winning television at the moment.
Yeah, it is.
This is award-winning standard writing. Yeah. This is
drama.
Writing.
This is the level he writes when he writes a drama. I mean, what gets me too is, and I'm just thinking that this now is that the Doctor wants to save him. He begs. It's killing him that they won't let him save him, and I think it's a good point to us, because in any other story, the Doctor would save them. Or they would go, well, we can't take him, he's different. And she goes, no, he helped us all. He saved us all. Let's listen to him. I've changed. Davies wanted to show you that people sometimes, you can give them their life back, and they will not change. They are incapable, because they put this bubble around themselves that keeps them warm and comfortable. I can't go outside of my comfort zone. I'm a big... as much as I hate racism, I also have this thing with classist shit. It's just like, you're not special because of who your ancestors are. You're not special because your daddy made $1 million. You're not special for making $1 million. That doesn't make you special.
And that's one of the things that we talked about in the first recording, was that idea of, and we mentioned it earlier, is like people had this sort of assumption that RTD coming back meant a repetition of the writing, of the patterns of seasons, of all these kinds of things. And I feel like, and again, in that original episode, we talked about how in the sort of Dr. Light episodes, your turn lefts, your in the Moffat era, the name of the Doctor, where, you know, when the Doctor is removed from the universe, everything goes to absolute hell. Like we experience this like unrecoverable apocalypse where the universe will end because the Doctor is not present. Whereas in RTD2, one of the real through lines here, especially in these Dr. Light episodes, which I actually really have treasured because it's made me value when Ncuti is on screen. It's made me value when Millie is there to support him.
You are waiting for them to turn up. You are waiting for them to be there and make it right.
Yep. But when the Doctor isn't there, again, and we talked about this in that first recording, like things go on very much the same as they have. And, you know, you hear that it comes up in the Lord of the Rings, where they're like, you know, in the Shire, things went on very much the same way they had for millennia. Or in the Millennium episode with Jose Chung's Doomsday Defense, he's like, what will the end of the world bring? And he's like, will it bring great change? Will it bring a new dawn, a new order? He's like, no, it'll bring 100 years of the same old shit. And like, that is what we see in this RTD era, is that when the Doctor is not around, you know, Kate talks about it in 73 Yards. She's like, you know, Ruby said, what do you do with the Doctor out? And she's like, yeah, we just thought the Doctor had sort of gone silent, which I'm not sure really what that meant either. But, you know, they do the best they can. They muddle on. And I feel like that is one thing that we are presented with in these Dr. Light episodes, is not like, look how great the Doctor is. He's such an all-conquering hero, the kind of person that armies turn and run at the sound of his name. It is, he's a guy he shows up and he does the best he can.
Yeah,
you know?
I like that about this thing, is that, you know, don't have him be the Band-Aid in every story. You know, have him be the witness. I like that. Have him fail, not on anything he did, but he doesn't win because he can't. You know, there's some people you can't help.
Yeah.
You know.
And I mean, that comes up in the Jodie era. Like I know Jeff, you're a huge fan of that, and I know we've talked about and you know, lots of people talk about, you know, what carried over from the Chibnall era in terms of the, you know, the timeless child arc, or like, you know, the being adopted, becoming a central part of the sort of the larger narrative. But the other thing that comes up in that very first, in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, is she says, I'm just a traveler. You know, I pitch up, and if I can stick a fork in and help out, that's what I want to do. And I feel like that we're seeing that in the Ncuti era developed much more as well, is that he shows up, he does what he can, and if he can't, like, he has to accept that, you know? And that's one of the things that was criticized about the Jodie era, is that she didn't topple governments, she didn't, you know, change societies. And I feel like that is something that is being underlined here, is that we cannot depend on the Doctor to be a superhero.
Yeah.
He's a traveler.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that, and I love that he's intertwined the flux. This is a new universe. I think we're going to find that out, that when the universe was put back together after the flux, it was put back differently, and that's why. Because there's a lot of supernatural, you know. I like that the Doctor is not perfect. He doesn't always win.
This is the closest we've come to the Doctor, not in the same characteristics or manner, but the closest we've come to the Doctor being like Hartnell's first Doctor in those very early episodes, where he is just travelling and exploring and unwittingly getting himself into situations.
Where he doesn't always have the answer or know what's going on.
No,
he's
exactly.
Always this Doctor is always on the back foot, and I love that, because it's what is going to, like, we know in the Moffat era that Matt Smith is going to make a big speech and everyone's going to run away, and then he's going to be, you know, he's going to say something glib. Like we haven't had two episodes the same this entire era, and it's wearing me out a little bit.
Yeah,
it is an exhausting watch, and with the frustration of the Doctor, and thematically we've talked about this, the Doctor being kept at arm's length from the situation for as long as possible, you know, until he gets through somehow. At the end of this episode, we see him finally come face to face with Lindy, and then experience their reaction to him.
God.
Absolute rejection.
And that's very hard for our hero, the one who we traditionally are used to coming in and saving the day and making everything better and right, not being able to do that in this situation. And there's a gut punch of there is no justice that we see on screen for these people.
Yeah, this entire species, this entire race. We don't know if they're humans because it's just called the homeworld, and the homeworld's been wiped out too.
Yep, they're all gone.
These slug
like
creatures.
One slug looking out over slug looking out over a ruined
city. The entire
city.
Civilization is gone because of its blindness. That these aliens just came and ate them all. It's really.
It is. Again, it's really bleak. And y'all were talking earlier about the strain of cynicism. Again, to revisit something we spoke about in our first recording, like for me, this was, again, I had such an experience after the first time watching this of just feeling sort of hollowed out. It took me a while to realize that because it was bleak, but there was also a concomitant, like at the same time, there was also sort of still a strain of hope, because the Doctor does try. He tries until they are out of sight. He is trying until he cannot intercede any further. Like, he tries, and Ricky September does the same thing. Again, I've seen people like conjecturing on the internet, like, oh, Ricky September was probably a space racist also, and I'm like, yeah, but and again, it's like, are we encouraged by Russell's writing to throw everyone that doesn't agree with us under the bus? Or are we allowing them to choose that will be their fate? Are we still trying to reach across, as it were, the aisle until we no longer can, until it becomes clear that they will not receive help? And I think that there is, again, it's very bleak, but I still do not think it is a cynical way of looking at Doctor Who. And the other thing I don't. And just one other thing I want to throw out there, because, again, it came to me while I was walking the dog, is like, and I don't know why, it just occurred to me, I'm like, this is also sort of, in a weird way, in the same way we sort of talk about Blink as a new to Who episode, or an episode of Doctor Who that sort of encompasses everything about Doctor Who, except the Doctor's barely in it. Like, that this episode sort of struck me as an anti Doctor Who. Like, we are defining what Doctor Who is by all of the things that we see that are antithetical to what Doctor Who is supposedly. Like, that Doctor Who arrives and is thrown into a prison, or arrives and is rejected. Here, he's not rejected until the very end. Like, here we get a sort of like, that sort of meeting of the Doctor and Lindy on screens where he's like, come with me, I will help you. Like, follow me, I will help you. And she refuses. And then you get the sort of relationship between her and Ricky September, which is almost a sort of anti-Matt Smith and Karen Gillan 11th hour meeting. Like, everything in this episode runs counter to what we expect about Doctor Who. And I feel that and the Doctor's sort of absence in these last couple of episodes is sort of helping us, by contrast, to define what Doctor Who is, by all the things he is not allowed to do in these episodes.
Yeah.
Sorry to rant again.
No. I think you're right, because she's more than happy to take the pop singer, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan-looking pop singer's help, but no. She's dismissive. Remember, that's why Ruby has to talk to her, because Ruby looks like her.
Well, and that's another thing that I was thinking about on the dog walk is, again, my experiences of racism in my life, like especially after 2001, when it didn't matter in America what your specific ethnicity or racial origin was. If you looked brown, you were pulled out of lines at airports. I was pulled aside in my first visit to the UK at a tube station for looking at a map of where I was supposed to go next. Like, and it was one thing that I developed a real appreciation for, and even joked about a little bit with some of my friends, the vast majority of whom are white, is this idea of a white privilege shield. Like, if I go into a white space with white people, I am generally treated differently than I am if I go into that same space by myself. And I feel like Ruby Sunday, like, that is something that I have not seen on Twitter this week, is like, or this weekend, is thinking about Ruby's role in this. That she is supportive of him, that she is there, not to correct him or to scold him or ask him to act differently, but she is there to support him. And I have a lot of time for. It's taken me this many weeks now. I feel. What episode are we on? Episode 5, episode 6. Like, I really like Shooty and Millie as actors. I don't know 100% that I was buying into them as the Doctor and the companion until these last couple of weeks, when ironically they are in it the least.
Yes.
That is very strange to me. But I again, seeing her be there for him it just reminded me of many of my best friends. That they are there to support me and to protect me, even though that is not their job.
Yeah. And that's compounded by the moment where Lindy is disgusted the fact that they're in the same room together.
Yep.
That really hits home. We're talking about it now, and these are episodes that you can't have an instant hot take on. These are episodes that you really do have to just kind of keep thinking about.
It's very layered.
We talked about this for an hour this morning, and we're having a completely different conversation about it 2 hours later. This is amazing.
Exactly.
It is extraordinary. And again, I said it after the recording last time. I'll say it during the recording this time. Like, it's as far as you're right. Hot takes just do not serve this material at all. Like, it's an ongoing. It's an ongoing, developing conversation, and I've been so grateful to podcasts like the FTE Gang's Second Great and Bountiful Human Empire, Trap One, various podcasts that I listen to that are my go-tos, because it feels like the conversations that each of these groups of people are having are radically different from each other. And I feel like it gives me such a tapestry of ways to think about and think through these episodes as a sort of ongoing conversation, whether I'm actually talking to the people or like with y'all, where I actually am able to talk through these things. And it is, like someone said on Twitter, that it feels like the span of time between episodes is getting shorter and shorter. And I feel that's because there's so much to think through in every episode that the next one is on you before you've had time to properly think. And we haven't even, we didn't even do it the last time either. Like, we haven't even talked about the episode.
Yeah. I mean, it's because it's
again, we have not talked about Doctor Who in
because sometimes with like old Who or new Who, sometimes they're light. I mean, during the pandemic, what I enjoyed was like watching something I had always thought of something as just a frivolous little story had different context because I looked at it through 2022 eyes. The Mutants, the John Pertwee story, the Marshall and Trump, they're both wearing the same size Depends, and but Barry Letts are showing you what colonialism and pollution and the stealing of stuff is. They're showing you that, but they're being very gentle with it. This ain't gentle at times. No. It's hidden behind a pretty pastel package, but there's a sledgehammer in it at the end that, and people are going to go, the woke thing. I'm seeing less and less of that because I think it's falling on deaf ears, because it's just,
and because we're blocking them out.
That's true. I saw somebody, another podcast.
I'm not even going to try and correct you on this. I don't see the point in wasting my life. you know.
And that's what happens here at the end of this episode as well. I mean, because that was, for me, I don't know about y'all, but I loved that Jodie. I loved the Jodie era. But being on social media during the Jodie era was exhausting. Like, by the end of it, like, again, as much as I loved Jodie and as much as I loved what was going on, like, I was ready for it to end because I was tired. I was tired of every time that I loved an episode going online and seeing nothing but vitriol. It was so exhausting.
Yeah. It was.
I have an upcoming episode of What's in the Box. Sorry, Ross. I have an upcoming episode of What's in the Box, and I talk about this with Jim to some length because Jodie's one of my picks, you see. But sorry, Ross. Go on.
No, I mean, there was another podcaster who was like, and I'm not gonna name him. I listened to a show, but sometimes it's a little too. It was like, well, why didn't they explain A, B, C, and D? And I just wanted to chime in and say, are you not paying attention? That has nothing to do with what the idea of the story is. a writer will tell you a story sometimes to tell you a story that A plus B equals C and it's a happy ending, blah, blah, blah. It's Star Trek, we're going to explain why things work, who cares, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it's all for that final moment. You have all the information about Lindy you need. You have all the information about the society that you need. Those people have shown you who they are.
And you have to believe them.
What they are isn't distasteful. And you need to think about, are you Lindy? Or are you Ruby? Or are you the doctor? The person being disregarded. And that's all the how-tos and whys the society works and blah, blah. That has nothing to do with the point of this story. The story is to put a magnifying glass to a social ail. And there's nothing in, the bubble. We all have a bubble. We all talk about it. Yeah. What bubble? In politics in America. What bubble are you living in? Are you living in the left? Are you living in the right? Or are you staying out of it all and have no connection to it all because you just can't take it anymore?
And in the UK, of course, we also had the social bubbles of COVID and lockdown. And that was people closing ranks, really. It's the end result of that, I think, is people not integrating, not being able to mix, not being able to swap ideas, swap cultures, swap anything, It was a case of we all had to kind of stick with our own a little bit. Yeah. And so that also then leads to social problems afterwards the balance has to be readdressed and you have to get something right again.
Yeah. And there was also the sort of conflict between the isolation, part of that was not a lot of people in the US too, because the day that they announced lockdown in March of 2020, like I went outside to go walk my dog and you could see they were telling people like, you got to stay in your pod, all this kind of stuff. We're doing this, hopefully for a limited time so we can sort of choke out the virus. It was like 6 to 8 people sitting in a boat together. The parking deck at the boat launch was full every day from the start of lockdown. And so it was not only the isolation, but it was the fact that some people like literally refused to do what was best for society. They refused
but that was
to
me.
do things
one
for
of the
their
essential
community.
People was my big pet peeve is you all, I caught this shit twice because I had to go out into the fucking world. And I have a problem with some of the people, well, you have to understand we had to lock down. I said, I do understand, but I also have some fucking anxiety and mental health issues because I didn't get that fucking option. So you telling me how hard it was on you will trigger me. It's like, I don't want to hear how hard it was on you.
And that comes up in this episode too.
And that's petty on me in a way, but because I'm dealing with what the shit and how it affected me.
Yeah, and again, we didn't even talk about this in the episode, that scene where, and again, Lindy is a hate-filled, very prejudiced, very ideologically fixed person, but also she has that moment when she runs into Ricky September after running the gauntlet of the slug creatures, where she says, like, I've never done that before, and he's like, it's not every day you face monsters, and she's like, no, I meant hug, like, because there were those first couple of years of pandemic where, if you weren't living with family or a partner, like you did not have literal human contact. I was not able to hug my best friend for almost 2 years. And like, I'm still dealing with that. So again, like these are people that we, not necessarily the people of Finetime like that we should hate or talk badly about, even though, again, we do laugh when the slug creatures eat them. I think we're encouraged to, but like, we're also supposed to see what has happened to these people to make them like this, and how is it? And the isolation is it possible? Yeah, and is it even possible to help them see the way out of it?
No, I get you.
And it's so hard. That's our lives,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so this was a fun conversation twice. I do want to bring up one of the light points. I love the slugs. I love that the monsters were kind of funny and that people died funny. And I wanted to ask Jeff, I was hoping they were tractators.
Yes,
really
very much so. I'm a
fanboy of me of the
child
Tractators.
80s. Yeah.
Well, because I mean, hey, I used to hate that story, but the last time I went through
Frontios
that
forever.
last season, I loved it. I went, oh, this is way more terrifying than I remember it.
But yeah, the effects work. I mean, we gotta give shout out to them. If you looked at Unleashed at all, and I know Ross, you didn't, but like they had practical models on the street, and that's what a lot of you saw in the a couple years ago on all the Twitter set reports was these giant creatures, but married with the CG effects is one of the best looking and interactive monsters I think we've ever had in Doctor Who. Unbelievably sophisticated effects work. Unbelievable.
I want a figure. I want an action figure. And like I said before, I want a swallowable racist. Yeah. And you can just wrap them up in it, and there you go.
Or it comes with 2 little feet, and when you plug them in, you squeeze the back, the legs go like
and the
this.
Legs fly.
And there's a scream.
Sort of like the Thundercats that I used to have, where you'd push the button and the little arms would move.
Yeah. Character options. Yeah, you need to listen to us.
All right, folks. Let's go back to.
And we do have to shout out Callie Cook as the star.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
We just totally skipped over that, but she was extraordinary and we were talking earlier. I mentioned earlier about this being an anti-Doctor Who primer. Like she is sort of, and the Unleashed compares her directly to Carey Mulligan, and she is sort of she has to play an anti-Sally Sparrow, which is, she just does such an extraordinary job doing a very, very difficult, having to carry an entire episode of Doctor Who.
Having
more or less,
not giving it all. She doesn't give it all away. You think she's a comical ditzy, and then it's like, no, she is
very skilled actor.
Yeah, it was wonderful performance. It was a wonderful performance.
And again, those moments where her face changes very, like, over the course of half a minute, to where she is making that cognitive dissonance, that move from, oh my God, I just survived, to I have to be a happy person again, because that is how we are. Like, to do that in that scene after she sends Ricky September to his untimely death, and then again in the boat where, she finally makes that turn away from the Doctor to reject him utterly. Like, that is her face. She's an extraordinary, extraordinary actor.
And unlike Carey Mulligan, who had people to play off, she is doing this almost entirely on her own. She is alone.
Yeah, she's talking to assistant director, reading lines, unless they were there. Shooty probably wasn't there because he was, a lot of this the way they planned certain episodes was because he wasn't as available, because he had other commitments.
It's very easy to just come in and sit in the studio and film those sections that needed to be shown on bubble.
Sometimes it's really difficult if you don't have someone really giving you good lines.
But what I mean is in the realms of making television.
Oh, because you got 9 days to get it all done, or whatever it is.
So you can do all of your location work, you can do all of that, because he's just not involved, he's off doing what he was doing. Yeah. But you feel the Doctor's absence, but you don't feel the absence of the Doctor, if that makes sense.
No.
We don't note that Shooty isn't around as much.
No,
not as impactfully as we do in 73 Yards, but in 73 Yards it made sense because of what was happening for Ruby, and that gave her a chance to really stretch her legs as well, because that was the first thing she filmed. So between the two of them, are we looking at two of the best British actors of the modern generation? Possibly.
Yep.
Three.
And it's
three in this episode.
And it's absolutely incredible that these last two episodes, 73 Yards and then Dot and Bubble, like, again, you're seeing the Doctor Who universe in a way that you've never really seen it before. Through a companion having to live her life without the Doctor, and now from the point of view, I mean, I don't know if we've ever had that except for, again, Sally Sparrow in Blink, that idea of, here's a random person who is in the Doctor Who universe. This is how being in Doctor Who affects a normal person.
Yes.
Like, again, to have that, it just gives us an idea of what this universe looks like from many different perspectives. And I think that's incredible.
It was. All right, well, let's jump to recommendations. We'll start with you this time, Melvin.
I've got to go back to, I think very briefly last week I recommended Callie Cook's last big starring role from, it was, I think, last fall on BBC Two. She was starring a 6-part apocalyptic comedy series called Henpocalypse, where they go to North Wales for a hen do, for a bachelorette party, and the world ends in a viral apocalypse, and almost every man is killed except for the male stripper they brought with them. And so it is completely out of control. And Callie Cook, again, I wasn't even paying attention. I didn't know that she was going to be in this season of Doctor Who, and I watched that a couple of months ago, and she is extraordinary in that as well. Like Callie Cook, I just cannot recommend whatever and I'm going to seek out whatever else she's been in, because she's unmissable. She's so good. She's so good. So yeah, Henpocalypse.
I'll have to check that out. What about you, Jeff?
I watched World War Z, or World War Z, if you speak proper English. I watched World War Z. I'm not recommending the film. I'm recommending the novel or the audiobook, which...
Both are brilliant.
Yeah. Much more in-depth, much more rigorous, much more World War encompassing. It encompasses the world, and it encompasses voices from around the world, from around different cultures, how those cultures have reacted to a zombie outbreak. It's a really fascinating story, and it's got so much scope and breadth. I've just re-downloaded it on my borrow box from the library, just so that I can listen to it again after watching the film to kind of get the taste out of my mouth. And as Melvin pointed out, shout out to Peter Capaldi.
It's law on Doctor Who podcast. You have to shout out Peter Capaldi.
And that his credit is Who Doctor.
Yeah.
Who Doctor.
I
also want to just quickly mention that both Scavenger's Reign and Godzilla -1 are on Netflix, and everyone deserves it to themselves to watch these.
Yeah, I need to check out. I'm going to be watching Scavenger Reign this weekend. I found out it was on HBO over here.
They're only 25-minute episodes. You'll bang through it. It's like watching the War Games in an afternoon. Piece of piss.
And I also do need to repeat my first recommendation from our initial recording, where I went to a music festival this weekend, put together by the record label and the management company that Sylvan Esso created, which are Artist First. It was called Good Moon NC, and it was very much sort of the ideal that sort of Doctor Who, I feel, is reaching for, especially in this RTD2 era, which is inclusiveness, welcoming, broad in scope, friendly to all comers, very welcoming. But yeah, a brilliant weekend, and I very highly recommend going and listening to Sylvan Esso.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I don't think I have one other than I've been watching. Me and my wife finished Reacher and Fallout on Amazon, which I liked. I love Fallout so much.
So good. I've been playing
my
Fallout.
wife was like, yeah, that's not the end of the series. I went, yeah, I think that's a season cliffhanger. I did hear something's coming out. The third and final season of a show called Sweet Tooth. It's based on a Jeff Lemire comic. It was on Netflix. It is a warm. It's still a post-apocalyptic, and it can be incredibly dark at times. The bad guys are dark, but it is about this one child who has been hidden away because all children are now born as hybrids, part human, part animal, due to a pandemic. And this child is raised in isolation with this person he thinks is his father. So when he goes out into the world, he has optimism and they do not. And he wins people over, and it's wonderful. It's much lighter than the comic. The comic's a masterpiece. I read it in like 3 days. It is fat, and it's way darker. The bad guys are bad guys, but this kid brings he saves people by being like the Dr. Worm and saying that we have to do better. And the child actor is amazing. Most child actors are it's hard, he's putting on a very grown-up performance. So, all right, that's my recommendation. All right, gentlemen, thank you as always. We will see you all next week for Rogue, where we get maybe a historical. Can I ever get just a plain historical where they're just in the past having an adventure? Is it that much to ask? And as always, we look forward to seeing you somewhere in time or space.